Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar on creating brilliant APIs. Brilliant APIs. I'm Arjo, your host for this session. Here at WeAreFrank, we specialize in connecting IT systems and business application. Our mission is to provide open, transparent, and contract-free solutions, leveraging the power of our own open source platform. With our expertise in integration, API gateway, and data virtualization, we enable seamless connectivity and data exchange. In this webinar, we have the honor to having Jeroen, our esteemed lead architect, a distinguished speaker with years of experience in crafting exceptional REST APIs. Yeah, I'm talking about you, Jeroen. Jeroen will share principles and best practices to help you to create APIs that not only work well, but also stand out from the crowd. Throughout the session, feel free to ask questions. Please ask questions in the chat. As the moderator, I will decide whether to address them or I will answer them in the end of the meeting. So let's give a warm virtual welcome to Jeroen, our esteemed lead architect, and dive into the insights of building brilliant APIs. Good luck, Jeroen.
Hey, thank you, Arjo, for your sales pitch on me. I think you pitched me, so that's good news. So let's start. Yes, I don't have to introduce myself. Arjo did, so but I'm not saying that I create brilliant APIs, but I have created bad ones, and I have a lot of learning experience from that. So that's probably better than creating brilliant APIs. What I found is that the API first is a common slogan with CIOs and architects within the large organizations. So so I'd like to stay with the famous words of an infamous person, and add the slogan, "Let's make APIs great again." Because the last few years I've come across a lot of implementations that could threaten the success of API first, actually. So I have enough information and sheets for an hour, so I have to be really quick about it. First thing, I will do a short recap on the REST APIs. I will assume everybody knows about them, but I will just have level the playing field, and everybody's talking about the same thing. One of the things I like is to see your API as I translated it from Dutch, but as your API is part of your corporate identity, or of how you want to look from the outside. So I think it's a part that's really important to think about it as such. And then, of course, the real life experiences of Jeroen designing REST APIs, which will be the most the most important from my point of view, because that's different than most REST API talks. So what does a REST API do? It manages objects or collections of objects. Now there's some rules there. If you create the URL, then you will have the collections in plural because it's multiple, and then you have the objects in a singular manner. So you have customer and customers. In this case, it would look something like my company, my API, and then a version of the API, the major version, and then the collection name customers, and then the identification of your customer, number 1, 2, 3. REST APIs are meant to work on all kinds of layers, but actually the only implementation you see where it really fits is HTTP. It's also possible to do it on other layers, but it's always HTTP, and it also makes use of the HTTP, all the HTTP elements like HTTP actions. So get to retrieve an object, post to create an object, put and patch to update or partially update an object, and delete to remove an object. I only specified the objects. You could also create a function delete to remove a collection, but yeah, that's done, but not that often. It also tells you to the REST API guidelines tell you to use the HTTP response codes to handle your errors. So the 200 range is okay, the 300 range is redirect, 400 range is something went wrong in the client, for 500 range on the server side something went wrong on your, if you call them, you get a 500, you know something went wrong in the server's not responding or something. So a second thing that's part of the REST API standard is that you can nest resources to add structure to your data model of your REST service, and that would look something like you have customers, and customer 1, 2, 3 has addresses, and we want address number 1. We'll do a get on this URL. If we do a post on the URL without the /1, we'll create a new address for this customer, and so yeah, I take this is common knowledge. And one of the things that you should use in REST APIs is make use of caching. For example, e-tags is useful. Yeah, but you only have to use it when it's useful, of course. So there's a lot of I don't see a lot of use of caching, which is one of the benefits of a REST API. So there's one of the reasons to move to REST APIs is that they're really cacheable, but nobody caches them. So that's one thing. So what's the correct? So yeah, how does a good REST API look? It should be simple, so it should be really understandable from a user point of view. So if I'm a developer, I should be able to understand your API really easy. And yeah, the easier the API, the better, of course. But yeah, it depends also on your target group. Who are you targeting with your API, and how complex is the process that you are, or the data that you are exposing. And one thing is also having good documentation. An open API spec is easily generated, but yeah, you want a little more. You want some explanation about what it's doing and why you're using it this way. Suitable, fit for purpose. It should, yeah. If you have an API that is suitable for user interaction, for this is an example, so you have it will have completely different features than if you have an API for integration purposes, because your user will have with your user you can have a lot more chatty way of communicating. So you can he asks for something, you show him what you have more, he goes there. If you have an application integration, you just you already know what you want. There's nobody defining his wishes during the process. And it's also, it's not a problem to develop your own APIs for application to application integration and other APIs for user interfaces with the same underlying data or API model. So that's a thing. It should be a reflection of your organization, department, or application. If you design an API, it should not. The decoupling principles are still valid here. So it should not. If you are an organization, you should not see your used applications in your API. You just want to see your processes from your organization and your business model, and not a specific application that you use in your business. If you create an API for an application, which is of course also done by application providers, then you want it to be an application API that shows what you do as an application. So then in that case, it's a little different. So if you base your data model behind the API on what your company would look like from the outside, so your changes will be limited to the changes that are actually relevant, and you don't have changes that are irrelevant because an or the backend system changed. If you look at the underlying processes and what your APIs that you offer, changes in this application, in these applications, yeah, they will have consequences for your users. So yeah, for your consumers. So yeah, just make sure you decouple. It's one of the things. They have to be uniform, ideally. So you choose your if you have an API and part of it is in Dutch and a part of it is in English, and or maybe the structure of objects are different, and yeah. When you set up an API from the beginning, you have a really good chance to start with a data model, like an external data model, and use that and make it really uniform, and also the naming of collections, the naming of objects, the relationships between stuffs, and naming of attributes. It is really important to make your API as useful as possible. Safe. It's a little bit of an easy one, but your API must be secure. So an API gateway can help you, but also you should look at implementing role-based authorization, attribute-based authorization, policy-based authorization, one of those or multiple of those, to make sure that your API is safe, so that you don't expose information that you should not expose. And for these rule engines, AirBak, ABAC, and VBAC rule engines, they still miss one little part of what I would like to see in a authorization of a safe REST API is you can say, okay, you can call this operation or you cannot call this operation. You can call this, you can retrieve data from this endpoint, but you cannot create data on this endpoint. So that's all covered. But the difficult part comes when you have a collection with multiple records in there, and your customer can only see his own records. So that way, you will have to you ask information from that collection, but actually you have to inject your user context in the query that is done on the database on the back end of that system. So this part is often overseen, and it's a security risk in a lot of APIs that I see. Even at the biggest companies, this can still be a problem. Robustness, yeah. Nothing is more annoying than a poorly performing API, disappearing messages, and then you get dissatisfied customers. Okay, so that's not a good idea. And data integrity is also something you really have to be looking into. It's not really 100% part of your characteristics of your API from the outside, but it is something you want to guarantee within the data of your organization. So we have to be sure to look into that. So so this is one of my things that I do if I look at an API and I start with an API. So the translation of business card is not exactly good, but it worked in the Dutch because your business card will also be the business card that's below, and it will also be your visitekaartje. So that's in Dutch, it really worked well, but I didn't have a good translation for this. So if you look at your API as your how your business looks, then it's also a good idea to have a sort of a marketing plan for it. So decide what is the strength, do a SWOT on it. So what are the strength weakness and analysis, so what are the strengths of your organization using this API? What are the weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? Just on a high level, you don't have to make a real big marketing plan, but it's really good to do this exercise when you start with an API for your organization. Yeah, what's the goal that we want to achieve with our APIs? Do we want to integrate the third-party applications, or do we, so that they can expand our market, or is there another? Is it app developers that create apps for us, or is it our own portals? Is it our own apps? So yeah, also make sure that you find, you do this plan, and also look at product. What's your product? What are you going to? What's your revenue model? So and what's the price of this thing? Is it worthwhile? So that's one of the things, the ways I like to look at it. Single entry point API. Yeah, what does it mean? There are people there are people and organizations that swear that they are really only want to create a single entry point API. So you have single entry point. That's what your consumer of your API knows, and from that single entry point, he just enters your API structure and then finds everything else from there. So there's a big advantage here, because if you change your model of how the structure here is, and all those URLs, they can change without any impact on your customer, on your consumer of your API. So there is a tricky part, and that is that your consumer somehow has to figure out how your API works, and where to find stuff, and how to, if he always has to go through customer to get to the car, to get to the appointments. That way it's going to be a little bit of a chatty way of communicating, and it will take some extra effort there as well. But it really suits situations where you have user interaction and people are like navigating through an archive or navigating through your information. It's more like a website. You start at the home page, and then you'll find all the other pages that way. But if you look at this model, and you look at it in a like a into system integration way of thinking, then this will actually this will lead to really inefficient way of working. So when to use it? When people are let's go back. So you should use this when you have a user interaction. Then you could use it if you're really you have an external audience that you don't have influence on. So for example, you have a lot of external parties using your API, then you expect a lot of change in your model, then you could use this. So an alternative to the single entry point API is create an API with all entry points on all collections as possible. You could even do it on a oh, I should have clicked here, alternatives. You could even do it on the only create first level API calls, or you could still have sub collections there. So it's an alternative, but then because it's more structured, and if you design it from the start and you design it well, it's most of the times it's not a problem to keep your structure the same. So and because all these endpoints are fixed, integration can be just straight going through the right endpoint. Of course, there's also a possibility to do like more hybrid implementations. So part of the structure is fixed and some part is not fixed. But in general, even if you have a single entry point API, then it's needed. But if you also in the other APIs, it's also a best practice to return the links between the objects as a minimum. So if you go from your customer to your car, then on the customer object, if you return it, there will be all his cars there or all his addresses there. So this is the hypermedia part of the API, and it's really yeah, I should have clicked before. I'm a little bit late with clicking, but but this is the URL structure where you can have the fixed URLs, and the hypermedia will just tell you if you have the customer object what his addresses are. So it will be allowing your API automatically to find, for example, the visiting address of a customer by using hypermedia. What is hypermedia? Hypermedia is that you not only return the API response, but you also return useful links. Is how I call them. So you use links to those objects, but you also can supply links to how to update the objects, how to navigate to the next page of a collection, and also maybe have grouping. So in the hypermedia, you can have a sort of a category, and you could say, okay, I want to automatically select the billing address. So are there any standards? Yeah. One of the problems with hypermedia is that there are multiple standards and none is like adopted as the standard. But we have HAL, hypertext application language, JSON LD collection, Siren, JSON hyperschema. So there's a lot of choices, but eventually they should contain information. They have links. They have so they have an object itself. Then you have links, and the links are going to to an external resource, have a reference, but they should have a relationship, so indicate what the link points to. They could have a title or a category, and they could have an action or a method. So there's like 4 or 5 different things that you have in a link to make it to organize it. So minimum, I think, is the location of the link, a title, and a category. We also have something called queries, and these give you the opportunity to add extra links that will add documentation about all the information that's in there. So query is actually documentation links within your API. It's also good to use, but not often seen because it's a lot of work. What problems do we run into? I don't know how I'm at the time, but I'm really if Arjo says I have to stop, I will stop, but now I will just continue. So what happens if one of the things that what I think is a really interesting subject is if you have links to external resources. So you have links within your API, you can manage your access. You can manage that, right? It is you are in control of your API. You're in control of your So for example, we have municipalities in our customer base, and what we see there is that they have like a central administration, but and the municipality itself has access to the central administration and all the data in there, but the customer doesn't have that one. So the central administration could be like a central government agency that has a certain set of information. So you need to you cannot just send the external link to them. You just have to give them a link that works. So you have to make a facade or something before it that will give you a link that will retrieve the data from the real backend system, sanitize it, get rid of all the hiding data, for example, the BSN number or stuff like that, which is not you're not allowed to expose, or other stuff that's not supposed to be out there in your API. So that will give you the access. So you have to make something in between, and that something in between, that facade, can also do other stuff for you. So it can also hide the real location of objects, which is also a good thing. So you will have you have something in between there. You can apply access restrictions, of course, on your own API, because you're in control, but you still have to get that data from another system. And if the data is coming from multiple systems, sometimes the shape of the object is not uniform. So you have to create something to mold all these objects into a uniform shapes, which is also a little bit of a challenge. So yeah, your user experience of your customer is important. So it has to be that's one of the things that is not easy to get right. They're dissimilar objects, so they have to be in the same form. And so this is so this is already told. So the possible solutions, hiding the location, the facade is something I do. Want me to continue, Arjo, or do you think it's enough? Because I have enough for hours, so I can go on and on and on. But maybe it's better to get the real, more. Oh, J-Paul is now coming in. Okay.
I think you have. Look at your slides. You have, I think, one or two very interesting topics. But
Okay.
maybe there is somebody else with a good question. Please ask the question then. But get a topic and take another 5 minutes, Jeroen, because I think it's interesting.
So let's see. Let's skip this one. I think the other one is this. So this is also one of the objects. One of the things I was really I indulged myself in the desire to make my APIs all RESTful. So sometimes it was this makes you want to make every call like through the RESTful principles, and I really tried. So, but you have to do a lot of rethinking of processes. So, for example, if you have a login process, you could say, okay, I create an object, a login object, and then I'll do stuff with it. And then, but eventually, I came to the conclusion I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to do all the in Dutch called omdenken, the rethinking process to get it all molded into a REST API call. So just accept that calls like login, calculations, you have to do a lot of. It's not the REST API anymore. It's not a simple thing anymore. So if you do a login, just create a login without thinking about the REST principles. If you have calculations, for example, you could create a calculation object. You send in your values, and then the system that calculates it can put some message there or put it on a webhook and then return it to you. But it's overthinking. So I stopped. Not everything has to be RESTful. So that's one of the things one of the takeaways, I think. But this is cool because I'll just put the whole sheet here. You have complex objects. So if you have objects, it don't have to be like flat objects. So you could say, in my situation, I have a customer and it only has 2 addresses, every customer has two addresses, a billing and a delivery address, and that's it. So there's no need to create a collection with addresses for that. So you could have like a more complicated object. So when do you create a complex object, or when do you split it up into separate collections? So does the subject have a right to exist? That's one of the things. For example, can it repeat infinitely? Yeah, then make it into a collection. Is the object not, updated separately? So if you have an update, you want to update just the address, there could be a reason to say, okay, that could be a reason to get it split up. This is a really bad one. Actually, this should not be there, but it is there, and that is what underlying storage are you using? So yeah, shouldn't matter, but it matters. So if you have, for example, some of the NoSQL databases, it doesn't really matter anymore if your collection is on your in the same, because it's all in the same data structure. So it can be a sub collection and an internal collection at the same time. So you have some more freedom there. And one of the other things is we process transactions, and that's the last subject I want to go on into. If you have something that is a transaction and it altogether it's a transaction, it could be a good idea to put it in one request. So we have one object and store that object and split it out later over multiple database tables, for example. So that's the last subject I'm going to touch, and then the rest I'll keep for later. So what do you want to do? So we have two different ways. The REST APIs are meant for data storing, but yeah, we do a lot of transactional processing. So we are thinking of a process and then think about a transaction. So what if you look at data storage? So we'll manage data objects, and the REST API is great for this. This is what it's meant for, right? So if you create an object or you update an object, your API consumer, you have some stuff there that you need to do, right? You have to just put the whole sheet there, because otherwise, I was going back, right? Back, previous. Oh, man. Okay, so your API consumer, you retry till you die, is what I say. So you retry till you get your HTTP 200 comes back if a consumer of an API, and of course, when you have functional errors, you should not be retrying till you get an OK. But okay, as an API consumer, you should hold you keep your message till you're sure it went well, because otherwise you might lose. If you create or update an object, you might lose your information. And if there is a user behind the buttons, they can fix your functional problems, or they can decide to continue or not to continue. So you have somebody to manage your process. So the create and update are the parts that you have. You might have a problem, but the get, it's really easy. So if you have an update, there's also a little difference between if you do put or patch. So is it if you do a put, then it's a complete update of an object. Most of the times it's idempotent, so you can try it again and again. So you can use the same retry mechanism as you use on a creation of an object. But if you have a partial update, it depends on the way that you do it. If the partial update is on a sub collection, it could end up in having, for example, multiple addresses, the same addresses. So yeah, make sure that your actions are idempotent. And So your API provider has to be idempotent. Your consumer has to retry till okay, and has to persist messages for create and update part. And then I'll put this slide here. So what if we do look from this perspective to a transactional processing? So we have a transaction, we have an order in our system, and then it has multiple lines, it has an address, and we want this thing to be implemented in one go. So yeah, what we could do is put all the information about the transaction, including all the sub objects, in one single message, like we do in our SOAP messages and other situations. So we are no longer sending a message that maintains a collection, but we are updating a complex structure. So that's would be one of the things that you could do, but it will be not really like the RESTful idea is done. Another way is giving control of the transaction to the consumer. So this consumer will try till he gets the okay message. In case of a fatal error, the consumer could be able to perform the all the actions for the post to make sure that it will be to for example to roll back. So you can say I do post something, I get an error, I post 3 things, 3 records, I post them, and on one I get an error, so I need something to delete the other 2, so I can roll back. But yeah, the moment you go into updates, this will become really complicated because you don't know, you cannot just delete an update anymore. So that's going to be really difficult. And the questions of the so giving the control of the transaction to the consumer, I think one of the things that's going wrong there is that we lose the part of keeping the API simple. Two-phase commit is a principle that we see in queuing and database and transaction managers. But transaction managers are not able to orchestrate over HTTP actions because they cannot roll it back. So, but you could create a functional two-phase commit. It's like the shopping cart on a web shop. You keep adding items to ready to order, and then you check your cart, and then you commit the order. And actually, your order number of your cart ID is your transaction ID. So you can keep sending this in. You can keep sending the transaction ID, and you can keep committing this order, but it's always the same one. So it's nothing's happening. You don't have duplicates. So that's a way that you that you see, and one thing in that shopping cart is that you have the end user in your web shop, and if something goes wrong and you return an error, he will be able to also decide what to do. So that will help you as well in an API to API way. Yeah, then it's a little bit harder because there's nobody to decide what to do at an error. And other things to think about is validation. So if you get in a message, you have to validate it. The better you validate the message and the consistency between messages, the better your data quality becomes. But it will also the performance costs are high, and it will be so there are trade-offs to it as well, and it will on your API side. And another thing that I see is I use sometimes is a cleanup process. So if you create objects and you give them all, they are all combined together, and you give them all a status fields, and then you can say on the end, I update all the status fields to complete, but I'll have a cleanup process that will cleanable, half-baked transactions while running. There are other ways of getting the data integrity in control, event sourcing and sagas, but I don't think that's really useful in a simple REST API world. So I'm not going to talk about it. Sorry about taking too much of your time. Again, it's just 45 minutes. Last time in Dutch it was an hour, right? But I will stop now.
It's going the good direction. The next time we do it in Chinese, and maybe you are done in 1 minute.